Throughout history, certain names have become synonymous with horror and fear. Individuals whose heinous crimes have left a permanent mark on America's collective consciousness. Today, we explore the chilling stories of the deadliest serial killers in U.S. history. From their troubled beginnings to their ultimate demise, this is the story of America's most infamous killers. Ted Bundy. Theodore Robert Bundy, a name that still evokes terror, was born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. His early life was shrouded in deceit, as he was raised by his grandparents, believing his mother to be his sister. Bundy's charismatic appearance and charming demeanor hid a dark and twisted mind that would later be revealed as one of the most notorious serial killers in history. Bundy's killing spree began in the 1970s, targeting young women whom he would lure with his charm, only to assault and brutally murder them. His methodical approach and ability to evade capture made him one of the most feared criminals of his time. Bundy was first arrested in 1975 but managed to escape custody twice before his final capture in 1978. His trial, where he famously acted as his own attorney, was a media sensation, ending in a conviction and a death sentence. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in the electric chair, but the true number of his victims remains a mystery. Jeffrey Dahmer. Born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer's early life was marked by a disturbing fascination with death. From a young age, Dahmer exhibited troubling behavior, which only escalated as he grew older. What began as an interest in dead animals turned into a gruesome killing spree that would shock the nation. Dahmer's reign of terror spanned from 1978 to 1991, during which he murdered 17 young men. His methods were horrifying, luring his victims to his apartment where he would drug, strangle, and dismember them. Dahmer's crimes went beyond murder, involving necrophilia and cannibalism, with body parts found throughout his home. His capture came on July 22, 1991, when a potential victim escaped and led police to Dahmer's apartment, revealing the horrors within. Dahmer was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms, but met his end on November 28, 1994, when he was beaten to death by a fellow inmate, John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy, born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, seemed like an ordinary man to those who knew him, a successful contractor, a community volunteer, and even a children's entertainer known as Pogo the Clown. But behind the facade, Gacy harbored a deadly secret that would make him one of America's most infamous killers. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy lured young boys and men to his home, where he would torture, rape, and ultimately strangle them. Gacy buried 26 of his 33 known victims in the crawl space of his suburban Chicago home, with others disposed of in nearby rivers. His downfall came after the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Peast led police to Gacy's home, where they discovered the grisly remains. Gacy was convicted of 33 murders and sentenced to death, a sentence carried out on May 10, 1994, by lethal injection. Gary Leon Ridgway, born on February 18, 1949, in Salt Lake City, Utah, is remembered as the Green River Killer, responsible for one of the longest and most prolific killing sprees in American history. Ridgway's early life was marred by a strained relationship with his domineering mother, which some believe contributed to his later actions. Beginning in the early 1980s, Ridgway targeted vulnerable women, many of whom were sex workers, whom he would strangle before dumping their bodies in remote locations around the Green River in Washington state. His reign of terror continued for nearly 2 decades, with police struggling to catch the elusive killer. It wasn't until November 30, 2001, that Ridgway was arrested, thanks to DNA evidence linking him to several murders. He eventually confessed to killing 71 women, though he was convicted of 49, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in U.S. history. Ridgway was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and remains incarcerated to this day. Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Carol Wuornos, born on February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan, endured a life filled with trauma and abuse. Abandoned by her parents and raised by her grandparents, Wuornos turned to prostitution at a young age, a path that would eventually lead her to become one of the most infamous female serial killers in history. Wuornos' killing spree began in 1989, targeting men she claimed had tried to rape her while she worked as a prostitute. Over the course of a year, she murdered 7 men, shooting them at point-blank range before robbing them. Wuornos was arrested in January 1991 after being linked to the murders through stolen items and pawnshop receipts. Despite her claims of self-defense, she was convicted and sentenced to death. Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection on October 9, 2002. Dennis Rader. Dennis Lynn Rader, known to the world as the BTK Killer, terrorized Wichita, Kansas, for decades with his horrific crimes. Born on March 9, 1945, in Pittsburgh, Kansas, Rader led a seemingly ordinary life as a family man and church leader, all while harboring dark fantasies that he would later bring to life. Rader's killing spree began in 1974 and continued until 1991, during which he murdered 10 people. His modus operandi was chillingly methodical. He would break into his victims' homes, bind them, torture them, and finally kill them, often taking souvenirs from the crime scenes. Rader taunted the police and media with letters describing his crimes, confident in his ability to evade capture. However, his arrogance led to his downfall in 2005, when a floppy disk he sent to the media was traced back to him. Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms and is currently serving his sentence in Kansas. Richard Ramirez. The name Richard Ramirez, or the Night Stalker, struck fear into the hearts of Californians during his reign of terror in the mid-1980s. Born on February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas, Ramirez's troubled childhood was marked by violence and a fascination with the macabre, which only grew as he got older. Ramirez's killing spree began in 1984, targeting victims in their homes across Southern California. His crimes were random and brutal, ranging from shootings and stabbings to sexual assaults. Ramirez left satanic symbols at some of his crime scenes, adding to the panic he created. His capture came on August 31, 1985, when residents in an East Los Angeles neighborhood recognized him from police sketches and subdued him until the police arrived. Ramirez was convicted of 13 murders and numerous other crimes, earning him a death sentence. He died of complications from B-cell lymphoma on June 7, 2013, while on death row. Edward Theodore Gein, born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse, Wisconsin, may not have the body count of others on this list, but his crimes were so bizarre and gruesome that they inspired some of the most iconic horror movies of all time. Raised by a fanatically religious mother, Gein grew up isolated, developing a distorted view of women and death. Gein was officially convicted of 2 murders, but his true infamy lies in what police discovered at his home in Plainfield, Wisconsin. The property was filled with human remains, including furniture and clothing made from skin and bones. Gein's crimes shocked the nation, revealing a level of depravity that seemed unimaginable. He was arrested in 1957 after the disappearance of a local woman led police to his home. Found unfit for trial, Gein was committed to a mental institution, where he remained until his death on July 26, 1984. David Berkowitz. David Richard Berkowitz, known as the Son of Sam, was born on June 3, 1953, in Brooklyn, New York. Adopted as a child, Berkowitz's early life was troubled, marked by feelings of abandonment and a growing anger that would later fuel his deadly rampage. Berkowitz terrorized New York City in the mid-1970s, targeting young women and couples in parked cars. His weapon of choice was a .44 caliber revolver, with which he killed 6 people and wounded several others. Berkowitz's crimes were accompanied by letters he sent to the police and media, taunting them and signing his letters as Son of Sam. He was arrested on August 10, 1977, after a parking ticket led police to his car and subsequently to his confession. Berkowitz was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences and remains incarcerated in New York. Albert Fish. Albert Fish, born Hamilton Howard Fish on May 19, 1870, in Washington, D.C., was a sadistic and cannibalistic serial killer whose crimes were so horrifying that they continue to shock and disturb to this day. Fish's early life was marked by extreme abuse, which shaped his violent tendencies and his fascination with pain and suffering. Fish targeted young children, often torturing and murdering them in ways too graphic to describe. He sent letters to the families of his victims, detailing the gruesome acts he had committed, further tormenting them. Fish's crimes came to light in 1934 when a letter he sent to the family of Grace Budd, one of his victims, was traced back to him. He was arrested, tried, and convicted of her murder. Albert Fish was executed in the electric chair on January 16, 1936, at Sing Sing Correctional Facility in New York. These killers remind us that darkness can hide behind ordinary lives. Their crimes have left deep scars and will forever be etched in American history. As we close this chapter, we're reminded of the ongoing need for vigilance and justice. If you found this documentary insightful, please subscribe, like, and comment below. Your support helps us create more content like this.